All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Paul Bridges and I'm the National Chair of the Communities in Bloom Foundation. Would really like to welcome all of you here to our first webinar of the new CIB 2020 Special Edition year. Today we're going to be hearing from our experts on community appearance, the category formerly known as tidiness, and heritage conservation. As you're probably aware and signed in, today's webinar is for registered communities only. And thank you for all your support for our 2020 program. Next week, we'll be hosting a second webinar, which will be offered to all Canadian and international communities, and registered communities are also welcome to join us on that one. In July and August, we'll be hosting 4 additional webinars on other judging criteria categories, and we hope you can participate there as well. At this point, we'd really like to thank our Community in Bloom sponsors and partners. Should be up on your screen, all of our partners who have stepped in to help carry the 2020 Special Edition through. We very much appreciate their support and all of your continued support to keep our program running. Today, I'd like to welcome 2 of our Communities in Bloom judges, Lorna and Larry Hall, who will be providing advice and answering your questions about community appearance and heritage conservation. Please feel free to ask your questions in the question and answer feature throughout this presentation, and we'll do our best to address them all. You can find the question and answer feature on the bottom of your screen. If it does disappear, you may just need to hover your mouse around the bottom to have it pop up again. I'm not a tech person, so this is a new one for us, so please bear with us as we go through today. But I'd like now to introduce the first of our 2 speakers, and our first speaker today is Larry Hall. Larry was born and raised in Saskatchewan. He completed his Bachelor of Education and a postgraduate diploma in educational administration. In 1999, he retired from the educational field, and he believes volunteering makes the community a better place to live. After retirement, Larry was the mayor of his village for 9 years, and this introduction to the CIB program convinced him that every community can benefit from being involved in the Communities in Bloom program. It was this that motivated Larry to become a provincial judge for the last 10 years. And Larry today will be focusing on community appearance. Thank you, Larry, for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Paul, for that introduction. Yes, community appearance, formerly called tidiness, is the presentation. Next slide. Community appearance includes an overall effort by the municipality, businesses, institutions, and the residents throughout the community. Elements that are evaluated are parks and green spaces, medians, boulevards, sidewalks, streets, municipal, commercial, institutional, and residential properties, ditches, road shoulders, vacant lots, signs and buildings, weed control, litter cleanup, including cigarette butts and gum, graffiti prevention, removal, and vandalism deterrence. As you can see, there are a lot of things that go into this category. Next slide. What I've tried to do in this presentation is to cover those things that are evaluated, but also show some of the slides of things that relate to that, which is a little bit of what's supposed to happen next week, but it's a bit of an introduction. So that evaluation first impression starts with the entry to the community. It includes the sign corridor, the mowed ditches, etc. Here are 2 good examples. Next slide. Another one of my favorites, a very massive entryway to Cold Lake, Alberta. You notice the mowed ditches and 2 beautiful boats, well-flowered landscaped areas. Next slide. Again, next. And part of that is the furniture. So we have benches and walkways. Notice on the right, the walkway with all the grass. Not a good thing to have because it will break up your cement and asphalt, but it's also a tripping hazard and should be removed. One of the things that we look at. Next slide. Graffiti prevention, beautiful murals, and there needs to be programs to remove graffiti. And we can talk about that. You may have some questions about that after. Wherever there are benches, people gathering, it's good to have garbage cans. And you notice the doggy bags. Wherever there are doggy bags, you should have some way or some place for individuals to deposit those. Next slide. Municipal buildings, your town office on the one side, beautifully landscaped, no weeds, no garbage, a really nice example. And whether that be a big city or a small town, Canistano, a Saskatchewan community, this is their water treatment plant, still well decorated, well signed. Next slide. Parks and green spaces. I put this in intentionally. On the one side, we have a slide, which is good. Kids aren't on it anymore right now. I guess they're going to be opening up. But notice the litter and the weed growth around the slide. Those are things that we don't want to see for all sorts of reasons. And on the other side, a well-landscaped park, big green space for kids to play in. I put that one in particular because those trees had been just pruned. There's a lot of dead growth in there, and the community did a good job of cleaning that up. Next slide. Walkways, two different communities, one in Newfoundland, one in Southern Ontario. Where there are benches, there need to be garbage cans, and you can see that further down on the right-hand side of the right-hand slide. And again, the doggy bags entering into and coming out of a walkway along with the garbage cans for disposal. Next slide. Your municipal buildings and your welcome centers are what are shown here, decorated or landscaped to different levels, I guess, but very clean, neat, tidy, and welcoming. Next slide. Businesses and institutions are also evaluated. Overall impressions, the site conditions, so the maintenance of the grounds, sidewalks, and parking lots, condition of the furniture. And again, I have a couple slides just to show what's appropriate. Next slide. Here we have community involvement, and on the one side we see a outdoor oven that had been built by volunteers to be used by the community at their will. And on the other side, one of the aspects of community involvement is recognizing communities. So this community had the Eco Connections grant, and they put up a plaque at their project to promote and recognize that volunteer involvement. Next slide. I think I lost a couple slides. Okay, the benches, I did want to comment on the bench on the left-hand side. All of that decorative work you see on that is actually stained glass that has been built into the bench. But anyway, I'll pause at that and open it up for questions.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for that, Larry. It's a great start and introduction to our program. I'll check our question and answer box here. Maybe just pause for a moment to let people formulate or think of any questions they might have. I know this format is new to a lot of us, so we're trying to go through things as slowly as possible so that everyone feels comfortable with the format. And when we're done today, if anyone has questions or comments about the format or about the program itself, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're all trying to work through this together and take best advantage of new ideas and new new ways of communicating. Okay, well, if I don't see anyone asking questions at this stage, I will move on. And I'd like to now welcome Lorna McElroy. Lorna is a lifelong gardener and a lifelong learner. Over the years, she's obtained her bachelor's and master's of education and enjoyed 25 years in the classroom. As a trained horticultural judge for 30 years, she recently completed the Prairie Horticultural Certificate Program. Having been a provincial, national, and international judge with Communities in Bloom over the past 16 years, Lorna brings a wealth of knowledge in a lot of these different areas of our program. And so I'd like to thank you, Lorna, for coming today.
Thank you, Paul. And thank you, Larry. I so enjoyed your trip across Canada with the emphasis on community appearance. Now, I am very fortunate to be able to talk about heritage conservation because I have found in the past years that particularly the natural heritage is sometimes underreported and not showcased sufficiently. We are more comfortable maybe with cultural heritage, and we think immediately of museums and celebrations. So natural heritage sometimes gets reported under environmental action or landscape. Next, please. Now, Communities in Bloom is all about greening. Okay, just back, thanks. It's all about greening. And with this increased emphasis on green spaces, it makes sense that natural heritage is worth more points on our evaluation form than cultural heritage. Natural heritage is 85 points and cultural heritage is 65 points. It is important to identify what is unique in your community and then celebrate that which is unique. Often, that unique quality can be a natural heritage feature. Now, natural heritage appears on the evaluation form for municipal, business and institutions, and community involvement. It's not there for residential because we usually don't get to view that part of the community for natural heritage. And as to what natural heritage consists of, it's all those elements of biodiversity. It's the flora and fauna, the plants and the animals. It's ecosystems, it's geological structures and formations, and so much more. Next, please. Now, natural heritage, when we think about it, we look for policies, plans, and actions. And of course, this depends on the size of the community. A small community, it may be mainly the actions, and a larger community would have well-defined policies and plans. And natural heritage is all about the management of it, protection of it, and promotion of it. Now, as to the management of natural heritage, it might be the red sand beach of Tignish, Prince Edward Island. It might be icebergs in the ocean off the Newfoundland coast, or it might be something more structured. For protection of natural heritage, this is a heritage tree in Jasper, Alberta, and it has been protected and plaqued and is much admired. Now, for promotion of natural heritage, it takes many forms. This example is, I believe, the Millet Heritage Rose Garden, where they are promoting the old heritage roses. Next, please. Management of natural heritage, that would be management of our ecosystems or ecological, if you want the big word, and our parks, eco parks. And this would include heritage trails, heritage tree walks, anything of that nature. And next. For protection of our natural heritage, that is very important, and it could be the protection of sensitive habitats. It could be protection of species, that could be plant or animal species that are at risk. We have all appreciated the increased emphasis on the protection of our pollinators, protection of all wildlife, protection of our grasslands. For example, our prairie grasslands, where I feel there's only 2% of the natural prairie grasslands left, and they certainly should be protected. And of course, protection of our wetlands. Next. For the promotion of natural heritage, that would be any program in the community that promotes natural heritage. It could be naturalization, and this could begin at the municipal level or at the residential, the business, institutions. It would be conservation groups, and they may be local conservation groups, provincial, or national conservation groups. It is the promotion of urban agriculture, or the promotion of farming if it is a small community with a farming surround. Promotion includes all the communication to that effect. Promotion along with tourism, hand in hand with tourism, and very much the year-round use and programs that promote the natural heritage. Now, outside the boundaries of your community, there may be natural heritage that really is a part of your community. I'm thinking of Leamington, Ontario, and in that, when I judged that community, many people in the community volunteered at Point Pelée National Park. So it was very much a part of the community. And I remember that we visited it. I believe it was the day before or the day after evaluation, but it was important to see the park and the connection that it had with the community. Of course, we can't, as a community, we don't want to borrow indiscriminately from these areas, but if there is a connection with the community, if it is part of the community, it certainly should be included. And this could be provincial parks, land trusts, archaeological sites, paleontologic sites. It could be UNESCO World Heritage sites in the area. And it could be indigenous sites that are important. So very much promotion of natural heritage. And next, please. We turn to cultural heritage. And with cultural heritage, there's the tangible parts of cultural heritage and the intangible ones. And the tangible ones are right there. The heritage buildings, the monuments, the memorials, cemeteries, don't forget cemeteries, and artifacts. Whereas the intangible ones are traditions, they're customs, festivals, celebrations. We are, as I said, more comfortable, I think, with cultural heritage, but we still miss some facets of it. Next. With cultural heritage, we have the preservation of it, integration of the cultural heritage, and cultural heritage activities. Preservation, you can see the construction going on preserving that heritage home in Amherst, Nova Scotia. And integration is integrating that cultural heritage into your streetscapes, landscapes, wherever. And this again is Amherst, and it is a diseased elm tree that has been carved, one of the remaining ones, been carved into a historic figure for the area and part of the streetscape. I also think of Pincher Creek, Alberta, where they have the giant pinchers that the community is named for. So there are many ways to integrate cultural heritage into the community. And activities pretty much speak for themselves. There are so many activities that could take place as festivals or all sorts of celebrations. And next. The preservation, focusing on the preservation, that would be the preservation of buildings, cemeteries, artifacts, museums, monuments, trees and gardens, and traditions and customs. And from judging internationally, you see centuries old structures and items of cultural heritage, but our history is more recent in most cases. And for example, in Indian Head, Saskatchewan, there's one of the last Imperial Esso red hats. And I was very pleased to see that being preserved. And Maple Creek, Saskatchewan has the Heritage District that reflects light of 100 years ago. So we mustn't downplay our history if it is recent, but it is just as valuable. Next. Integration of cultural heritage can take place with heritage streetscapes, heritage landscapes. For example, at the local museum, where I volunteer by planting and tending the vegetable garden, it must look like a turn of the 20th century vegetable garden. So I have to take care not to put any modern conveniences and hot caps and things in there, but just keep it in tune with the age of the museum. Next. The activities for cultural heritage, which we are familiar with. The next slide. For celebrations, festivals, traditions, and customs. There we are, and we have an open air. Activity going on there, and you can learn a lot just from that slide as to what is happening. So that would be it for natural and cultural heritage, and I believe that we are ready for questions.
Great, thank you very much, Lorna. Again, I'll just open up our question and answer line to see if we have any live questions at this point. I do have some questions that came in previously with some answers, and then I also have some other questions that we will look to Larry and Lorna for that people had sent in ahead of time. So again, if you want to send a question in, hover over the bottom of your screen to the Q&A area, and then you should be able to input a question. And I will try and monitor those as we go through. We've got a couple of people just joined us a little bit late coming in, but welcome, thank you for coming. And I'm just gonna start with a couple of questions that we had that we sort of already created answers for, just maybe they would be questions that you might have had as well. First one that came in was, why is cultural heritage included in the Communities in Bloom program? And where does it fit into, greening or the environment? So Communities in Bloom, we're all about the entire community blooming. Cultural heritage helps define a community that is participating, and we're talking about celebrating who a community is, where they came from, values, customs, and the legacy of built in hard assets as well as natural assets within the community. In celebrating this, the community is also celebrating everything that it does in the community to make the community a better place to live, work, and play for all its residents. And from a marketing and tourism aspect, it helps to present a total package of a beautiful, blooming and colorful community, celebrating heritage, environmental milestones, potentially the green canopy of trees and the amount of tree canopy within the community. So sort of looks at it as a very holistic program, trying to ensure that we look at aspects that sometimes aren't easily viewed or tangible. And I just actually had a live question come in, so I will ask Larry and Lorna to answer this one. And the question is, how does outdoor art fit into the judging grid, and how important is this against investments to protect natural heritage? So Larry and Lorna, can you see the question and answer screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay,
Yes.
great. So
I would just say that, you know, the outdoor art would probably fit into your landscape section, but if the art is of a nature that is concerning heritage, it would of course appear there as well, if it is something that reflecting the heritage of the area.
You know, I've thought about this a little bit in the past. Outdoor art, and I was thinking of it in conjunction with my topic for the day, which was community appearance. A community is like a living body, and you want it to be healthy. And for our bodies to be healthy, we need to recognize our past, our history, and that kind of helps determine where you're going. So there's an awful lot of outdoor art that I think celebrates and recognizes where we've come from. And I think that it helps build a community when those kinds of things are visible in your community.
great. Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Lorna, for that. One of our international judges, Bob Iveson, has just posted a comment for us. And he's saying, when looking at cultural and natural heritage, I start with seeing if the community recognizes what they have for heritage. Do they understand what they have? And then how do they preserve and promote it? So it's a really good point to sort of think about from that perspective. Lorna, would you like to add to that?
No, I think that is a valuable comment that, and we're all growing in this program. And so it's important that our comments and our suggestions be positive, and that sometimes when you live in a community, you are so close to things that you don't appreciate the real value of them. And so I think that it's just to recognize that heritage and then to go from there.
I agree. I think one of the benefits of having judges come into a community is to take a look at that community with outside eyes, because often when you're living in this location, you don't recognize the valuable things that you do have. And we all have history. Yesterday is history. This COVID situation is going to be major history. And that is something that isn't recognized. And we all have natural heritage as well. We live in locations, and those locations were there long before us.
Great, thanks, Larry. Another question that sort of follows that same sort of format, and this is coming from John Lohaus, who's one of our Communities in Bloom committee members. How about the many iconic welcome creatures or icons that one often finds at the entrance to towns and villages? You know, the big beaver, the big nickel, the apple in Meaford, things like that.
Okay, I live next door to the big beaver at Beaver Lodge, Alberta. And I think it's very important to treat these with respect and to understand how the community got together and erected these monuments, and to never act in any way that would downplay the importance of them. Recognize the community value of getting together and having an icon. It may not be your idea of the best landscaping or the best idea, but approach it from the community's viewpoint.
Again, I live just outside of Regina. We're two major cities in Saskatchewan, Regina and Saskatoon. Halfway between those two cities is a little community called Davidson. And the big landmark that they have on the highway at Davidson is a big coffee pot. Mm-hmm. And whenever there's a meeting of people from the two communities, guess where we meet? Is in Davidson, and usually coffee's involved. So all of those things relate to, again, our histories and the kinds of things that happen in our communities. They need to be promoted and recognized.
That's great. Thanks, Larry. Bob Lewis has posted a little comment for us, which I think is very telling and fitting here. Outdoor art, paintings, and murals. When they are done throughout communities, it does tend to become a deterrent to graffiti. And I've seen that in a number of small communities. Here in Guelph, where I actually live, it's interesting. On the university campus, they have an old cannon that the students are allowed to paint. And it gets painted sometimes 5 times in a night. But it is the only spot on campus where there tends to be, call it graffiti, call it art, expression of art by students. But it's understood there is an area for expression, and other areas then tend to be left alone much more. So thanks, Bob. I totally agree with that comment.
Yes, I certainly do too. And I know in my community, there has been a graffiti problem, and we have wrapped the utility boxes. And there has been no graffiti after they're wrapped. There's a respect for them. And we wrap them with either heritage photos or local photos or local artists' work. And they really have been respected.
Yeah, certainly graffiti has been an issue in a lot of communities. And I think it's well documented that if there are nice murals, they're usually not touched by graffiti artists. But every municipality should have some type of policy in place to deal with graffiti when it does appear. And one of the suggestions that I've had given out in the past is that the municipal vehicles, as they're traveling around doing their daily jobs, should have a can of white paint or whatever with them so they can deal with that graffiti right away. So if it appears, it's dealt with within 24 hours. And if it's immediately removed, that's another way of discouraging graffiti on your buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you, Larry. Nola Sanderson has posted a comment from Maple Creek Communities in Bloom, saying we're in close proximity to a provincial park, Cypress Hills, and a National Historic Site, Fort Walsh. They're really a part of the community, and in the past they'd never mentioned them and had never had those sites visited by judges. So they're happy to see they can include those, and wondering, I guess, question to us as the Communities in Bloom Foundation, is there a way to create visits to that maybe while the judges are there, even though our judging time is limited? So I think that's a good comment to take back to our home office and put into committee and see if we know communities have something like that, maybe it's something we can add to our list. If there are other specific sites that community feels very specifically portray their image or impart into the context of their community. So thanks very much for that, Nola. Larry, Lorna?
I've never judged Maple Creek, but
I have.
when I hear Maple Creek, I do think of the Cypress Hills. And I would hope that, you know, an informal, you wouldn't take half a day to go visit there, but of your judging day, or your evaluation day. But if an informal visit the evening before or the morning after, or even a slideshow presentation of the area, just that so that it is part it's part of the community and just include it, but in its own space.
I think,
Great, thank
yeah,
you.
a slideshow is a good idea.
Yeah, I think we talked about first impressions. That maybe could be part of that first impression for the community, and maybe it's not face-to-face, but at least we could get an idea of its relevance. And John Lowhouse has put a comment to go with that, and he just sort of reminding us how important it is to keep up those iconic features and communicate the context of those and interpretate them properly for the community. So, you know, if they're there, use them as a valuable piece of marketing for your community, but also be sure you're really proud of that feature as well, that it's well kept, tidy, and people know the purpose of it. I think that would be a big, big help. Bob Iveson has also commented that communities need to define their community before the judges visit. So using those entrance features, using those iconic landmarks within the community, your cultural heritage, your natural heritage, really determine, smart thing to do, determine who you are, how you're trying to present and put your community forth. I think will help you, if you look internally, it'll make it a lot easier to present externally.
Mm-hmm.
And Larry, Lorna, anything to add with that one?
No, and I think this is something that, you know, this skill is built up over the years with Communities in Bloom, that communities get to appreciate really what they have to offer and what a good place their community is to live. They get to appreciate their strong points and what impresses a newcomer to the area.
Yeah, I think all Communities in Bloom committees need to realize it's not a sprint, but a marathon. And as they develop their program and their community, it evolves, and it just takes time to get there.
Absolutely. So, question to both you, Larry and Lorna. Do judges look for how Communities in Bloom committees in their community document their linkages or coordination with heritage and arts organizations?
Definitely.
Definitely.
It's all about working together. It's all about, that's the strength of a community.
That's definitely part of the evaluation. We always look at community involvement. So that is right across the board, from young children to the seniors' homes. How are they involved? How are they developing that healthy community?
Great, thanks. While people are sort of walking through and thinking of other questions, I'll go back to our list of previously asked questions in here. And next question is, why are there 3 areas of reference to green spaces in Communities in Bloom? Some people sometimes find that confusing, and sort of what goes where. So we do have 3 areas or criteria for the environment and then landscape and natural heritage conservation. We have first being natural heritage conservation, those elements that exist naturally, untouched. We look at elements of biodiversity, the flora and fauna and ecosystems. As Lorna had mentioned, our eco parks, grasslands, wetlands, wildlife, species at risk, and the preservation, protection, and education of all of those. So that sort of falls under our natural heritage segment. Then we look at landscapes. Green spaces created or built and maintained by man. And this includes green or soft landscapes, sports fields, parks, turf areas, and then hard surface and or built landscapes, streetscapes, public places, site furnishings, signage, structures, and in that case, we'd be talking about outdoor community art as well. And then our third area in there is the environment. And then this really goes to the action side of it. How do public actions minimize impacts of human activities on the environment? How do we protect what we've got out there and deal with the environment? And then other action items being, how do we have waste reduction, conserve water and energy, improve air quality, looking through that. So sort of as an overriding factor, it's a very big topic, but incredibly important as to how we move things through. Larry and Lorna, you add to that?
No, I would say that from a community standpoint, you know, don't worry too much. The judges are not there to say, oops, this is in the wrong place, you know, no points for you. The judges are there to help you grow along the way. And so just make sure that you get the information there. And Paul's differentiation, I think, is helpful, but don't agonize over it.
And I know as a judge, you know, you look at a historic tree and then is that going to go under the urban forest, or is it going to go under preservation of culture, natural heritage? All of those things are important. And I guess in my mind, it really doesn't matter where they end up, but they need to be looked at and considered and evaluated, given credit for, or recognized for what they're doing, no matter where it appears in the grid.
Okay. Got a follow-up question, Larry. You led into this one really well. What is considered a heritage tree, and how do you go about protecting them?
Oh, protecting them. Well, that's where your arborist certainly comes in handy. So there's no doubt he's a key factor in that. Perhaps some municipal regulations around that tree as well would be very helpful. Certainly public education in terms of protection. In terms of recognizing them, that's a little bit, I think, more difficult. I've got a fairly new oak tree I've planted in my yard, and it's maybe 10 years old. It came from a little old lady that lived in our village and grew it from the little acorn into something that was about 2 inches tall when she gave it to me. To me, that's one of my heritage trees in our yard, even though it's very young. But that's a difficult one. I think maybe from my perspective, if a community wants to declare something as a heritage tree, maybe it is.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, different provinces and different municipalities have different guidelines as to the age of a heritage tree. But there's also the fact that if it has cultural significance, it's recognized as a heritage tree, like the Vimy Ridge oaks that I have been able to see in different communities with the history behind those oaks. So it's not a cut and dried, has to be 50 years old, has to be 100 years old. It depends on the area that you live in. And I would say don't hesitate to name a tree that is special to your community as a heritage tree. If it has that significance to your community, it deserves that recognition.
I certainly agree.
No, those are great examples. Thank you. We have several Vimy oaks in our hometown here. One at the Veterans area in our cemetery, our memorial park. One behind our city cenotaph. And I am lucky enough, I have one in my yard. Huh. I'm on the Vimy Oaks Foundation as well. So the story of those trees should continue on. The city is protecting the one at the cenotaph. It is a designated tree within the city, and that is just by Parks and Rec's definition because of the virtue of it. Up at the cemetery, it's extremely well protected by the location it's in. The cemetery has a very strong replanting plan and a reforestation plan to keep tree canopy. And up in the Veterans area, that tree will be very well tended and cared for. The one in my yard will be our legacy to our neighborhood, I hope, over the next 100 or 150 years as it matures out. But they're a great living example of how to give back So Lorna, thank you for bringing that one up for sure. Going to go back to a comment a few minutes ago from John Lohaus again, and he was saying further to both you, Larry, and Lorna's comments of maybe the communities could do a formal inventory of everything that they have to help them define themselves and what they're trying to represent. And then in pursuing such an inventory, there seems to always be surprising resources or places that people even within the community didn't know about. And the question really is, how can Communities in Bloom committees sort of tease out these little nuggets or gems within the community itself?
And again, I think it's a matter of time. You probably don't catch everything the first year, but as you continue to work through the process of evaluations, judges' reports, it takes place.
Bob Iverson's made a comment back into talking about heritage trees. We're jumping back and forth a bit, but that's no trouble. Bob's saying, a heritage tree is one that is important to the community. So I think if people step up and try and get something recognized, as well as formal mandates and bylaws and rules, where the community steps up, that is really when municipal partners tend to listen. And again, that tree doesn't have to be old, doesn't have to be any specificness to it, other than it is critical or important to the community. Oakville, Ontario, built a road around I think it was estimated at a 250-year-old oak. Multi-million dollar road deviation from what was originally planned. And so now one street drives under an oak that is probably, the canopy would be 50 feet over each lane and 80 or 90 feet high. So amazing when community comes together to look at something, what you can achieve on that end. Bob Iveson also mentioned that RBG and Q, Royal Botanical Gardens there, did have 2 heritage trees, but they lost one in a large storm back in 1987. So then it was repurposed, so it still had a second life to it, and it was made into a memorial bench for other centennial celebrations. So great example. We do that at work and take trees from sites and turn them into furniture on site if the tree has to go, or a memorial bench or a placard internally so they can last. So I think it's a great way to give things a second life and carry on that fabric of a community.
Yeah, putting plaques on things like that is really important to recognize its history.
Definitely. We the Vimy oak at our cenotaph, they're actually waiting till the tree is large enough to attract attention before they put the placards on. They've found that young small trees with placards draw attention, and the young small trees are somewhat delicate and people want to touch them, feel them, which is wonderful, but it's hard on them when they're immature. So they've been waiting a number of years and sort of gauging it on, is the tree stable enough to attract attention? And, does that mean people will swing on the branches, take leaves off and that type of thing? So I think it's very important to put placards out to them and to ensure people understand why they're there and their historic value and knit into that fabric. But possibly that's a good idea. Wait a little while so that tree is somewhat established before you're drawing attention to it. Great. I'm going to move on to the next question and see, where did I get to? Sorry. Another question came in previously, and this goes back to our graffiti questions. Any big thoughts on how to prevent or control graffiti in a community?
Preventing for sure. I've seen a lot of neat programs. In one community I visited, they had the fire department, individuals from the fire department, the firemen, the city police, I think it's just maybe those 2 groups, were allowed to go and ticket kids that were doing good things. So if the city policeman was out and he saw kids playing in the skate park and they had picked up some garbage or did something, they were given this little ticket, which allowed them to get an ice cream cone. And that is sort of a positive way of looking at preventing graffiti rather than trying to be negative in terms of what's going on. But definitely removing it as soon as it appears or as quickly as you can. If you leave it there, it attracts more graffiti. So get rid of it right now. And definitely with keeping things neat, tidy, good looking, helps eliminate that graffiti problem. I know in our community, we decided to put up a mural. I'm involved in our culture center, and we had contracted 2 artists to do a mural for us. We live on a lake, so it's a great big pickerel fish. They had kids working on it as well. And we wanted to put it up on our seniors building here in the community. And the town office and mayor at the time said, oh, no, it'll all be covered in graffiti, et cetera. We fought with them for a long time. They wanted to put it inside the building, which put a mural inside the building. We eventually put it up outside after finally convincing them we'd be responsible for maintaining it. We insure it. That thing has been up at least 10 years now, and nobody has done anything to it because it looks really good. Come out to the village, I'll be happy to show it to you. That is, again, something that's been documented over and over again. Good murals, good attractive things do not attract graffiti.
And further to Bob's comment that the problem are taggers, they like to see their tag. And so it's so important, as Larry said, to get these removed quickly, covered up. And the worst thing that can happen is for the local newspaper to publish a photo of that graffiti with their tag. And it happens, but that is just the worst. It gives them that notoriety that they're looking for. But quick removal and all the other suggestions.
Great. I know a comment came in from John to that same note. He judged a city that had a contest that had all the schools paint or decorate the snowplows. And then the winner was celebrated in the paper, but it's sort of like that, the idea gave of that canon. Give youth a place that they can express themselves with art, with a live art wall that is expected to change and develop. Put parameters around that, of course, for what is acceptable. But it's a great way to sort of say, come and be creative and engage yourself in the community. Let the community see you doing it, and we can be very proud of the art you create. So.
Agree.
Great. Move on to I'm gonna move on to here. This is more of a general maintenance question. And with our changes in horticultural practices, what is the most effective way to remove green material or live growth within hard surfaces? Larry, the cracks in the sidewalks.
There are all sorts of ways of doing it. A lot of communities do not promote herbicides, so we can eliminate that for them. One of the things I've done and I do recommend are the blow torches to burn that stuff out. And that works quite well. It has to happen perhaps twice a season. But that's one way of dealing with it. And I Googled this the other day. There are all kinds of chemical formulas that are vinegar and salts, etc., that can remove that. And of course, if it's not a whole lot of area, get down your hands and knees and pull it. If it is a big area, you may end up having to dig out the area, put down some type of mulch, some type of fabric, and protect it that way. It's not an easy problem.
No, here in Ontario, we have a pesticide and chemical ban on things such as that. So yeah, the tiger torches, as they're commonly called, or backpack torches are one method. But in a lot of places, we are back to that manual labor perspective. And with municipalities having lesser and lesser budgets, unfortunately, sometimes for green space, I think it's really about engaging them and showing them the importance of green space and tidy, healthy green space, so that the budgets don't disappear there. Bob talked about using a steam or a hot water jet. So I've seen a few of those around, but yeah, a lot of different solutions being tried right now, but it comes back to manual inspection of one form or another, unfortunately.
See, in the prairies, a lot of communities have, I think they're called hot betties or something, to melt out the ice of the culverts. They're used in the spring. They might be something that could be used later in the summer to deal with the unwanted plants as well.
Okay, great. Thanks, Larry. Just going to check our time. We've got just a couple minutes left. So I've got sort of a general comment going back and asking Larry and Lorna, both of you, what are you as judges really looking for in your first impression? What's the biggest way to catch, for the communities to catch your eye and move up in a category if they've already achieved it, but they're trying to go to that next level of a silver or gold? What do they need to do?
Well, first impression for me, it starts as I enter the community, and I like to see the mowed ditches. If they have welcome signs, I've seen welcome signs that you can hardly see because of the weed growth. I've seen signs up in a community that trees have overgrown the sign. You can't even read it. And then there's always the litter and cigarette butts and things like that that are lying around. Every community should have, if people are still smoking, places for people to put their butts. And again, I've seen all sorts of things. One community, they had cigarette butts. They didn't want people smoking by the door, so they had the cigarette butt container on a tree, but I'm going to exaggerate, half a mile away from the door. Nobody used it. They were still throwing them on the ground. So it's those kinds of things that strike me. Litter, weeds. Those are the things that turn me off.
Yeah. I would agree with Larry's words, but I would say that with the first impression, with me, it's very much, would I like to visit this community? Would I like to live in this community? Like, it's just the whole feeling of the community. Is this a place that I would want to come back to? So it involves the tidiness, but it's everything else about the community.
That comment, Lorna, is the one I use at the end of the evaluation. We have a big property here, and eventually we're going to have to move away. Is this a place that I would move to? And that relates to everything that's happening, as well as the tidiness, for sure.
Great. Okay, well, as we come upon the end of our time, I just want to once again thank you, Lorna and Larry, for all your information today and your presentations, as well as the answers to our questions here, and thank all of the communities that have participated today. And just so you're aware, we want to make sure you take the chance to look at our sponsors and see who's helped us out. Without them, we wouldn't be carrying on with our program for the year. So thank you to them. And then we look forward to seeing seeing some of you next week on Thursday, the 25th at 1 o'clock. And we're going to host our next webinar on outstanding community examples and best practices for community appearance and heritage conservation. I'd also like you to save the dates for our future webinars in July and August. Thursday, July 23rd, and then July 30th. They are landscape and floral display presentations. And then in August 20th and 28th, we are talking about urban forestry environmental action. So Larry, Lorna, any final closing comments as we move on with our day? And thank you once again.
I would just say thank you, Paul. This was a first, and I certainly appreciated the comments and the questions and the participation. Thank you.
Yeah, we look forward to presenting again next week, a little bit more detail.
Excellent. So I hope everyone online found this informative today. Please feel free to forward your questions to the foundation. With your input and feedback, we can continue to improve and really make sure we keep all our communities engaged. That's what this is about, keeping us all together in a time when we can't be physically. So let's all work in our gardens together still. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you at our next talk. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.